Hello, everyone. We will get started shortly. We have a few slides to keep you entertained until we get started. Welcome to the town hall meeting. And as you're joining, if you want to put your name and where you're zooming in from and your organization, that would be great so we can get a sense of who's on the line. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Governor Inslee, you have some friends from Washington joining.
Great. All two of them, huh?
They're coming. We have a lot of people still joining.
That's great.
As I was telling Anne earlier, this is one of my favorite wildflowers, Stepford pink.
Beautiful. What elevations do those grow at?
They're actually here in the east. It's just on the ground level.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if they're in the west, actually.
Yeah, I don't recognize this flower.
So pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. Go ahead and put your name and where you're calling in from and what you do in the chat. We get a sense of all of you. That's great. And we still have people joining. And Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson was a keynote speaker at our conference last year. She's fantastic. If you haven't read her book, I encourage you to do that. She's wonderful. Wow, we have so many people from across actually North America and beyond. It's wonderful. Welcome, welcome. And thanks to all of you who are putting land acknowledgements into the chat. It's always nice to hear that and see that. We have We Act. This is fantastic. And we'll put the name of Ayanna's book in the chat in just a minute. Again, we'll get started in just another minute now. Welcome to the Town Hall webinar. So excited. And Jose, you have some friends in the audience, as well as many others of you. Okay, 30 more seconds and we'll get started, everybody. Welcome to all of you. Okay, everybody, welcome to today's special town hall webinar, looking at the intersection of climate, education, and justice. My name is Judy Browse, and I'm the executive director of NAAEE, and we're just so excited that so many of you could join us today. We have such a wonderful lineup of speakers, including the governor, and you'll get a chance to meet everybody in just a minute. I also wanted to just say happy first day of fall to everybody. It's kind of cold and rainy here in DC, but always helpful to have rain, especially for those of you in the West. And thank you for joining our 50th anniversary celebration this year. Really happy that you could all join. And today's webinar is focused on that powerful connection between education, climate, and justice. And we really couldn't have a better lineup to help us think about all of these critical connections and some of the really hopeful and helpful things that are happening across the country and around the world. And you'll get to meet all our speakers in a minute, but we're so thrilled to have Governor Jay Inslee with us again. Many of you have been following the great climate change education work that's being done in the great state of Washington, and you'll hear more about that in a minute. And Governor Inslee has also been a great friend to NAAEE and was part of our closing session at last year's virtual conference. So really excited to have him here today. And we also have a super lineup of speakers following the governor that includes Christina, Frank, and Laura, moderated by Jose Gonzalez. So great lineup today. So what we're going to do is we're going to have finish this very short introduction and then remarks from Governor Inslee. Jose will moderate a question and answer session. We'll be taking your questions as well. We'll hear remarks then from the panelists with another question and answer session. And then Sarah Boder, our own Sarah Boder, will be closing, the Director of Affiliate Relations and Policy here at NAAEE. So I'm just going to go very quickly because I know we have so much to cover today, but I do want to say that we all know how important this moment is and how important it is for the work that all of you are doing in climate change education. There couldn't be a more urgent time to really focus on the work we're doing and get education in as part of the solutions that we have. We need to keep advocating for more and better climate change education, formal and non-formal education, supporting the administration's whole of government approach to climate change and justice, and ensure that education is included in our work to address climate and that is part of the policy work that we are doing. And at the same time, keep that dash of hope in terms of what we all can do as a society. And we need to keep learning from each other, replicating what's working, building on what's working, because it's so important to share, learn, and grow to have the impact and to balance the urgency with the hope. So if you are new to NAAEE, I'm going to turn it over to Jose in a minute, but I just want to let you know that these webinars are opportunities to bring new ideas and insights and innovation to the field of environmental education, how we can adapt to the world during this pandemic, as well as thinking about how our work can keep better centering on equity and inclusion in everything that we do, and how we can shape a new narrative going forward. I want to thank our affiliate co-hosts who have been so wonderful in spreading the word, and we work with every day to help advance environmental literacy and civic engagement. And a special call out to our Washington State affiliate, E3, for all the work that you are doing to advance environmental education. I also want to thank EPA and E360 for helping to sponsor these webinars, and a special call out to Ginger Potter for all the work she does to support this great environmental education work across the country. And also thanks to Anne O'Malley, our Director of Professional Development and the manager of EE360, for all that she does to manage the webinar series and all of this work. I know you've been on 80 bazillion Zoom calls, but some of you don't use Zoom and you use other platforms. So I just want you to know you can talk to us by the drop down and either send a note to the panelists that you see or to everyone. And you can talk to us through the chat. You're all muted. And please type your questions, any resources you have, and you'll get a copy of the recording, the PowerPoint PDF, and the chat. So we look forward to hearing what you're saying in the chat and keep up on what you're doing. And we also are doing live captioning. So if anyone needs any help with the video or whatever you need, thank you to our captioner, Chris, for the live captioning. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jose Gonzalez. Many of you know Jose and have worked with him over the years. He is the founder and director emeritus of Latino Outdoors. He is an experienced educator as a K-12 public educator, an environmental education advisor, an outdoor education instructor and coordinator, and an adjunct university professor. His work focuses on equity and inclusion frameworks, and he practices in the environmental, outdoor, and conservation fields. And if that's not enough, he's also an illustrator and a science communicator. His commentary on diversity and environmental and outdoor equity has been featured in a number of high-profile outlets, including High Country News, Outside Magazine, Earth Island Journal, and Latino USA. He's collaborated with the White House Council on Environmental Quality, the US Department of Interior, and the National Park Service during the Obama administration, and he has represented Latino outdoors in several coalitions and has been recognized with so many honors, including the National Wildlife Federation's Environmental Education Award and the Grist Magazine Grist 50. And Jose also serves on the boards of a number of organizations and has helped so many of us in the nonprofit world do a better job in what we're trying to do to center equity and build leadership. So thank you for being here, Jose, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Judy. I love the visual. And goodness, I might need to ask you to do my introductions from here on. Make it sound fantastic. So thank you all. I'm going to take a very quick minute for two things. One is to say hello, and then take the moment to introduce and turn it over to our esteemed guest of honor, the governor. First of all, my name is Jose Gonzalez. Full disclosure, though, it's Jose Guadalupe Adonis Gonzalez Rosales de Leon. I'm an immigrant from Mexico, but I've grown up in California and then meandered throughout the United States ever since then. He, him, his, I'll respond to anything offered with joy and respect. And normally I would be calling you all in from the ancestral, traditional, stolen, and unceded land, Southern Isedan, Southern Maidu, Miwok, among others in California, Northern California. Although today I'm greeting you near Hopi and Diné Navajo land in Arizona. And so I want to say that I'm grateful you're all here. The key takeaway that I'm orienting myself as we get going with this is this idea of the reality of climate change and all of the manifestations of it that demand a sense of urgency, hence expressions such as climate crisis, climate urgency, and so forth, and the role of education, which I think many of us throw that, well, not here, but let me rephrase that. I think many outside of the education circle throw the word education around without really grasping the intentionality and the work that goes into ensuring that it's done well. And I can't think of such a critical element and tool that is necessary to ensure that we really tackle the realities of climate change. And of course, do that with equity in mind so that we're really addressing the climate justice aspect, or rather the climate injustice aspects of it. So with that, it's un placer to be here all with you. And I want to welcome and introduce Governor Jay Inslee from the great state of Washington, in which I've had many an adventure, both urban and non-urban, both in the east and west part of the state, north and the south, and where I know I also have the joy of having many friends and colleagues as well. So Governor, I don't want to go through a whole long list of introduction in terms of who you are. I'd like to have you have the opportunity to share anything along those lines. And I want to turn the floor over to you to also gift us with some words.
Thank you, Jose. And I look forward to next time you're having an adventure in Washington State. I hope I can get out with you. They had a picture of you, the big, huge smile on your face. And I hope that was taken in Washington State. But we'd like to keep Washington State as open and healthy as it is, so we can continue those adventures. Thanks for this invitation, everybody. Thanks particularly Krishna Roy, a friend who helped us get involved in this, and love to share a few sort of viewpoints from Washington State. You know, the first is you know, fundamentally, the whole climate challenge is one involving education and one involving knowledge and fundamentally understanding, because we know we can build a clean energy economy and defeat climate change. It's just a matter of our intent to do so. We know we have the tools to do this. So fundamentally, this is an education challenge. If the whole world understood the depths of this problem and the ability to solve it through using clean energy technologies, we would solve this problem. And, you know, so when you think about it, fundamentally, education is the key to the solution here. And so I really appreciate an opportunity to talk about it. And we know that education is also extremely important for educating the people who can solve the problem. namely some of the scientists and the technicians who are building this clean energy future. By the way, yesterday, I just got to share yesterday, it was so cool. I got to see the clean energy future in Washington State. I went to the manufacturing company in Arlington, Washington, building the first all-electric commercial airplane, a 9-seater. It's already been ordered by DHL, the freight supplier. They're building an all-electric, zero pollution airplane in Arlington, Washington. We hope it'll fly this November. I went to a company that builds a new battery that can increase battery capacity by 50%. So our electric cars can have 50% further range. I just mentioned these things at the outset of my comments because it is we are in challenging times, and I love the voices of optimism that are out there. So I'm going to start my comments by a little story about my favorite environmental educator of all time. That's my dad. My dad was a biology teacher at Garfield and South High School, a beloved coach, great outdoorsman. And I was thinking about him yesterday because I saw a picture of the General Sherman tree down in California. This is the world's largest tree by volume. It's a sequoia down in California, 200 plus feet tall. And I saw a picture of it having to be wrapped in, it may have been aluminum foil or something, to try to protect it from the raging fires. And I was thinking about this because I had a day with my dad that to me just crystallized what we're all about in this joint mission that we're on. And just think about this. Now we have to wrap our trees to protect them from climate induced and increased forest fires. I was down there a few years ago, and what my dad and I knew might have been our last hike together. He was battling blood cancer at the time, and I thought, and he wanted to get out in the mountains one time. And I said, Dad, let's go for hikes. We went down to the sequoias, and we went down there, and we were going to hike up to see the General Sherman tree, largest tree in the world. And my dad was a very strong person, very, very tough guy, big outdoorsman, climbed all over the Cascades. And we headed up this little trail. It's about maybe a half mile, maybe a mile. And we got about halfway, and my dad just, he just couldn't make it. I mean, he was, he didn't have enough red blood cells. And we sat down on a stump, and my dad was very, very angry that he could not keep going because he's a very prideful person and great athlete. And we were sitting there, and he was cussing up a storm. Well, he didn't really cuss that much, but he was very upset that we couldn't keep going. And then we saw these two people come up the trail, and they were people that just did not look like athletes. They did not look like outdoors people, but they came and they kept going up the trail. And my dad looked at them going up the trail, and he said, dang it, if those two people were going up this trail, I'm going up this trail. So he stood up, and we made it to the tree. And on the way home, I had to kind of grab his belt and carry him the rest of the way home as we're laughing about our circumstances. That was my last hike with my dad, but he got to the tree. And the reason I tell this story is we know that in moments like this, where we can get a little bit frustrated by lack of progress, we got to get off the stump. We got to keep going. We know we can keep going. We can get there if we just use our heads. And this is where education comes in. So I want to tell you that I think this is pivotal to the mission statement of humanity right now, to make sure that everyone is educated about the science behind both the problem statement of climate change and the solution statement of the ability to embrace clean energy sources of energy and efficiency. And I think both of those are important. So I'm going to just share 3 observations about how to make this mission work. First off, we have to make sure that all of our educators are armed with the knowledge that they need to convey it to their students. And that is something that has not historically been done. Most of our educators in our public school system were not science majors. We have to arm them and make sure that they are totally comfortable with the science behind this, both again from the science of climate change and the science of what it takes to build clean energy solutions. And so we have been very intentional in our state by giving our educators more education, all educators, not just those who teach science, so that those who teach English and history and social studies can convey this information. So we've provided an opportunity for them to have not only academic sort of briefings on this, but experience. So we've got a way for our teachers to go out and get out into the field with scientists to see the ramifications of climate change, and also to see some of the companies that are building new technologies to build a new clean energy economy, to give them a hands-on experience. And I think this is being received well by our educators, so that they are totally confident standing up in front of 25 students to address their questions about this. And I think I commend this to other states. I think we're leading the country in providing our educators with an ability to do that. It's tough enough to stand up in front of 25 kids, but it's tougher if you haven't been given the full curriculum yourself on how to educate students. And I do believe this is very important for all of our educators, not just the science educators, not just the physics or the biology educators. We got to make sure that this is embedded throughout our curriculum, so that when we're teaching our kids English, they're writing about climate change, they're writing about their vision statement, they're writing about how they relate to the climate, what they can do about it. When we're teaching history, we talk about the history of the development of technology and the history of how other societies have dealt with this. I think incorporating this throughout all of our curriculum and all of our subjects is really, really important. So that's where I would start, making sure that our educators are armed with what they would need. Second thing we're doing, and this is particularly important from the aspect of environmental justice. I got turned on to this at age maybe 4 or 5 when my dad took me down to the beaches at Carkeek Park and showed me the little creatures under the rocks and told me about them. I immediately became a little environmentalist at age 4 or 5, because I was lucky enough to have that experience. Not all our kids have that experience. Certainly the kids living in the inner city who, never spent a night in a sleeping bag or out on a trail. So we have to make sure that our children have outdoor experiences, hands-on in the environment, so that this is not just an academic exercise for them. So we have now in our state embraced, we're on a mission to get every single young person to have an outdoor experience. Last session we came up with an appropriation enough to start that with about 20% of all of our students. We want to get to 100%, obviously, because we know that once a student has an experience, looking at the pH themselves, testing the pH of a little swamp somewhere and understanding what that means to the life of a frog, get to see an owl in a tree, they're lifetime outdoors people and lifetime environmentalists. One night outdoors makes a lifetime of commitment and connection. So having that outdoor experience is of pivotal importance in this mission statement, and particularly important from an environmental justice standpoint. So these kids have never been outside of the inner city. And a high percentage of our children, it's amazing, when I talk to kids, they've never been 10 miles away from their home. So this broadening experience of an outdoor experience is absolutely critical. We have to find a way to finance this, to help our public schools finance this. We have to develop more outdoor learning centers. We have some tremendous ones in our state. On Bainbridge Island, I was just at the St. Helens Institute down where our latest volcano went off. By the way, I want to point out that while I've been governor of the state of Washington, not a single mountain has exploded. I'm very proud of that in the state of Washington. So outdoor education means justice, it means success. We've got to focus on it. The third thing I want to address is that I think we have some tremendous environmental and climate change education opportunities associated with the operation of our schools. So giving students the ability in their environment themselves to look for opportunities to encourage clean energy and energy efficiency. Certainly in having them lobby school boards for buying electric buses, our kids should not be having to breathe this diesel smoke from these old buses. Having them be able to look for efficiency in their building, having them look obviously in recycling opportunities and nutritional health opportunities by using locally obtained food, which is an energy efficiency standard. So giving them an opportunity to see themselves in an environment, their school environment, to themselves become climate warriors, giving them those opportunities can be very, very successful and enlightening. Now, I've said some things I'm proud of our state, the things we're doing, but boy, thanks for all the educators. Thanks to Tammy Murphy in New Jersey, who has led this effort now in New Jersey to make sure that we have standards for climate in every grade. Thanks for her leadership. Thanks to the Clean Network for what they've done, which they've been, advocating this since 2008. Thanks to the Coalition for Climate Education Policy that has been convened for pushing through this envelope. Thanks for everybody working in federal government for their work they're doing. And it sure is great now to have a president who's really being proactive on this. Thanks to everybody on this call for the work you do. By the way, it's a good morning this morning. Yesterday, China announced they would no longer be financing coal-fired plants in other countries. That's a great first step for China. Thanks to President Biden, who yesterday said that we would double our commitment to help developing nations finance clean energy projects and their transition. There's some good news out there, but it starts with education. So thanks for everybody for what you're doing. And Jose, I'm looking forward to some really easy softball questions and ideas that I can take home.
Happy to, and thank you so much, Governor. We know you have a host of many other obligations to tend to, and we're hoping you can stick around just for a few questions. Of course, I'll look for your cue when you need to make an exit. But I'll mention two things, and then I see some questions are kind of coming in here. So I want to honor what some of the participants are dropping in the chat as well. So you had mentioned, you gave thanks to New Jersey as an example. And so one of the questions is alluding as to what are you seeing in terms of actual governors across the state working together, coming together? What are you noticing in terms of not just the challenges, but I hope some of the opportunities and successes in making this really cross-state work, so that ideally, what Washington is doing fantastic, other states can benefit from that, and then vice versa, what you're noticing that other states are able to do, and then look at how that's implementable in Washington.
Well, there's tremendous working going on from governors across the country. And I'm inspired by them. We like to compete with each other to see who has the best programs. So that's a healthy competition. I started with Jerry Brown, the Climate Alliance of Governors. We now, I think, 26 states now who are working in concert. We did that when President Trump sort of wanted to withdraw from our international efforts, because we wanted to show that the states could lead, and we can lead. We can lead where the federal government cannot act. We are quicker, we are more innovative, and we can be the laboratories for democracy on this. And that is going on big time. So you look in New Mexico, where Governor Lujan Grisham has expanded wind and solar dramatically. Obviously, the great work that Gavin Newsom has done. All the people in this alliance, and there's 26 of them, have done great things. And that is really important. We also will be going to Glasgow ourselves to the international conference, because we think governors and mayors need to be very active in aligning and aligning our efforts. Now, at Glasgow, they refer to us as subnationals. They refer to states and counties and cities as subnationals. We think we're supranationals, because we're ahead of our nation states. We are. My state has much better climate policies than the United States as a whole right now. We have the best climate, the best cap and invest system, the best efficiency standards, the best zero, carbon-free electrical grid laws in the United States. So we're very proud of that. So we're way ahead of the federal government. And in many states, we always want to be ahead of the federal government, because we can act much more quickly than the federal government, which has the filibuster to deal with and has some states that haven't really been progressive on this issue. So you bet we're active, and we will continue to lead the country.
Thank you so much. And then I see a few other questions. So I'll try to frame them together, hopefully into one question that makes sense. The core of it, I think, is you mentioned, right, as a kid, having the opportunity to go and look at the little critters,
Yeah.
and that how, often in environmental and outdoor education, we talk about these positive, transformative youth experiences as a kid. And so some of the questions are around this idea of the state's commitment to ensuring that equitable access to all youth. So I know you made some references, like what would it take, what's underway, what are the challenges? And then as that is unfolding, are there ways that you're considering for the reality of, this is not the environmental education of the 1950s. Looking to 2050, you have to account for being more respectful of Native sovereignty, for example, and inclusion of them in this process, and the realities, of course, of racial justice and injustice, ensuring that especially Black and Brown youth aren't taking into these experiences and then end up being policed in ways that perpetuate that exclusion. So hope that makes sense. I know I'm giving you quite a bit, but I'm curious your thoughts on it.
Well, the question is, what do we do about several centuries of lack of equality? What do we do about that? And I'm for doing hands-on things. And as I've indicated, I think the single most important thing we can do, of the most disparate thing when it comes to a young person's experiences, is this lack of outdoor connection, lack of being on a trail, lack of being in a swamp, lack of a chance to experience and see a deer and an elk on occasion. That is the biggest dividing line right now, where in our diverse communities, people have not had those experiences. And if you don't have these experiences, you don't have a connection. You don't have an emotional connection. So this has been hugely unequitable in our society for a lot of reasons, because of our housing patterns, because of our economic dislocation that diverse communities are experiencing. And so I think the single most important thing we can do is to right that historic inequity by giving everybody equal access to those experiences. If I had to pick one thing, I think that is most important. The second is to provide, basic, fundamentally equal educational opportunities, which is not equal in our society. We have huge disparities still, where wealthier suburban kids have access to scientific education that inner city kids don't, because those inner city kids don't have a budget. And in our state, we're one of the better states having equality in this regard. But in so many states, you still have a gross imbalance of just simple budget, of whether you can get a science lab, whether you can have a Bunsen burner, if you still have such things. So having equitable funding for education obviously, reflects on the scientific opportunities. Then there's a whole issue of language. I was in a school the other day, or a couple of years ago, where there were 122 languages spoken. 122 languages spoken. And I was in one school district. And so having language opportunities is obviously important as well for our new Washingtonians. We're proud of some of the things we're doing on that. So there's 3 concrete ideas we got to do. Most all of those take some money, but in the first instance, they take some commitment. And we want to bring that to this effort.
Thank you so much. And then, are you able to hang on for another minute as
Yeah, you bet.
panelists?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
I just have to go fight COVID. This is the high point of my day.
There you go. Easy peasy in that case. I want to take this opportunity to invite into the conversation our invited panelists as well. I'll just quickly kind of invite them in and mention a little bit about them, but offer the opportunity for them to add any additional introductory elements, and then see if one of them is super eager to have a question for the governor as well. So first, I want to invite and welcome Dr. Christina Kwok from Unbounded Associates and Center for Universal Education at Brookings. She's a social scientist with a current interdisciplinary focus on education for climate change and a wide range of expertise along those lines and more. Also, Frank Neupold from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, so NOAA. He serves as Senior Climate Education Coordinator at NOAA, and also an Action for Climate Empowerment National Focal Point for the US, among just one of the few many responsibilities he has in that role. And then Laura Shifter at the Aspen Institute. She's a senior fellow with the Energy and Environment Program, leading the K-12 Climate Change Action Initiative, lecturer, a wide range as well of expertise in the field. And so with that, welcome all of you. And I see Laura, I want to say Laura, sorry, it's the Spanish language in me. Looks like you're ready with a hand up. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jose. And thank you so much, Governor Inslee, for being here. With K-12 Climate Action, we so appreciated your engagement with us earlier this year. And we just released our report yesterday. And one of the big recommendations we have coming out of this report is the opportunity for our education sector to really mobilize to address climate change, and thinking about the opportunity to scale some of this work by developing comprehensive climate action plans for our education sector at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level. And it really consists of a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, from the built environment, the infrastructure, and sustainably thinking about that, to thinking about adaptation, to thinking about the teaching and learning in the curriculum. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, there's so much great work going on in Washington State right now. If there has been any talk of developing more of these comprehensive education plans across the State Department of Education or with the State Board of Education in Washington, and whether there's any appetite to really think about the comprehensive needs of the education sector in that way.
Well, yes, and we are constantly thinking about this. I actually have to tell you, I'm not satisfied with the consistency of our climate education in our state. We've tried to improve that consistency, as I've indicated, by teacher education, so that all educators are armed with this information. But that's not universal yet either. I would like it to be. I would like every educator to have this curriculum. Not everybody has access to that yet. So one of the things is to make this as more consistent. I also think there's probably an ability to have a more consistent curriculum on this subject that advances it in a more consistent pattern. We have a disparate pattern. We'll have some fantastic programs in one high school and sort of rudimentary in another. So yes, I think there needs to be more work on this. I've made a run on this legislatively and haven't been successful today, but we're going to continue in that direction.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Governor. And it looks like Frank is also ready with a question.
Thank you very much, Governor Inslee. You've been doing amazing work in Washington State and nationally in this area. So a great deal of gratitude. I've been leading climate education for NOAA and federal government for about 15 years. And what I've seen is an emergence of, as you said, the laboratory of democracy. And there are places, just as you were describing, unevenness, excellence and absence. And sometimes it happens on policies, like the work you're doing with Climb Time, an excellent partnership that the state has funded, not the federal government, the state has funded, connecting researchers and schools and scientists together to really up the game for and support teachers. But you have other states, as you noted, New Jersey doing amazing work on cross-curricular standards, or California has just recently funded climate curriculum. And so what I've been seeing is there's an unevenness, even in the interventions, they're uneven. And then you have cities doing amazing work in career and technical education out of New York or Pittsburgh. So even in the cities are doing some of this unevenness. But we kind of alluded to it earlier on, and I think, Jose, your first question got to this, but how do we build those collaborations so that the technical details of what Laura just shared, or what a city is doing, or what a state is doing, could inform other states on why this is important, how they're having, so we can accelerate our practice. But that requires collaboration, which requires networking. And right now, what I'm seeing is that is one of the missing pieces of connecting excellent people to others, whether it's governor to governor, mayor to mayor, you name it. But how do we connect people more effectively with effective practice to accelerate this?
Well, you're just putting a bug in my ear, but it's a really good question. And the first thing I think is using the National Governors Association
Okay.
or the Democratic Governors Association to have a best practices discussion kind of networking. We should think about an opportunity to do that. That's the most obvious place to do it. So let's put our heads together. Let's think about that. I'll ask my staff to think about doing a National Governors Association forum on this in some of our meetings. So there's one idea to think about. And so thank you for that idea. I'll try to run with it.
Happy to help in any way, raise the game across the
Good.
country.
We'll put you
Critical.
to work. My son used to work with NOAA, so we love NOAA.
Happy to be of service.
Speaking of collaboration, that's perfect. And then Governor, I want to give an opportunity to our third panelist, Christina, as well, who's been patiently waiting with a question in mind too.
Thank you so much, Jose. And thank you, Governor Inslee, for your remarks. Certainly want to commend you for your leadership in Washington State. For me, I have been doing work on the intersections of climate change, education, and broader issues of equity and justice. And my concern is that as we, as the education sector and as leadership begins to focus on how we can use our education systems to really help leverage and help us transition into a low carbon economy and so on, that we might begin to conflate climate justice issues with equity issues, and therefore lose out on a very important point, a very important entry point for broader systems transformation that can cut at the underlying systems of marginalization and exploitation that have helped to perpetuate the climate crisis. And so I'm curious, in your view, how we can ensure that we don't slip away from really targeting climate justice issues, environmental justice issues, racial justice issues, gender justice issues, and slip into sort of the language of equity that I think our education system is quite comfortable talking about in some ways, but not oftentimes always successful in addressing.
Well, I think the way you do it is you put it in your legislation like we did in our climate bill. We have the best environmental justice provisions to deal with historic patterns of racism that we've suffered that are now reflected in our living patterns and our economic dislocation. And we put that right in our bill. So we now have a requirement that 40% of the investment goes to these marginalized communities, and those who have been smoking and choking on the dust and the smoke and the freeway diesel fumes. So we put it right in there. 10% needs to go to the tribal communities investment. So you put it in, with binding commitments. That's the most rational thing to do. We learned from the California experience and made our environmental justice provision stronger than their first take on their cap bill. So we had that advantage, and I'm really proud of that. So I guess what I'm saying is you just got to put it in black and white, and put it in your statute, and that's what we've done. Now that's not going to solve our 400 years of injustice, but it's a place to start, and we've got to do that. Jose, I'm going to have to sort of go fight COVID now, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for gifting us this time. Like you said, we know you have a host of other duties, COVID being one of many. And so we're grateful for the time that you spend here. So muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias por todos. Thank you very much. Good luck. Everybody get
Thank you.
vaccinated.
Thank
Be
you
well.
so much, Governor.
We'll see ya.
Perfect. Thank you. So as the governor is tending to other duties that are highly impactful, want to spend more time, obviously, with our panelists here and both get to be blessed by their expertise and what I consider provocations, because I think what's the point of being so knowledgeable in this field if you don't also raise some really good questions. And so to start, I want to ask each of you if there's any additional reactions or responses that you have or that are percolating in your mind, both in terms of what you heard the governor say at large, but also, of course, anything else that might have come from that. So I'll let you sit that with the second, and whoever would like to go first, unmute and jump right in. Christina.
I do, and it does sort of rest on the question that I asked the governor, and that is a deep concern that as the education sector finally looks at climate change with a serious lens toward action, that we will begin to really try to techno-fix our way through and not really address some of the underlying structural changes and structural transformation that needs to happen. With all due respect to the governor, I think there was definitely some points in his remarks where I had to humbly disagree with his approach, or at least his framing of some of the issues. I think there is a very big difference between having inequitable access to outdoor spaces and then thinking about the unjust economic systems that have created that inequitable access. And really thinking about how we can use this as an opportunity. We have a golden opportunity right now to use the climate crisis to really start addressing underlying systems of inequity and injustice. So how can we really, challenge the status quo here? Go beyond just thinking about how we can reduce the carbon footprints of our education system to really thinking about how do we transform the very purpose of education. So I'm lingering there right now, and really trying to think, how can we help push leaders like Governor Inslee to really think a little bit more deeply about climate justice.
Thank you, Christina. And I might come back to that because I want to test the assumption and presumption that many here can understand that distinction that I hear you making with words like equity and justice, and what others might be able to ask, like, give me an example, or what does that look like in terms of my practice? So I'll loop back to that since I know we have time, and I see that Frank is also waiting.
So building on Christina's point, I think when we were thinking about this, and it was kind of implied in what the governor said, but implied and actionable are not the same. And I think that what I've come to is we need a plan, because to take what Christina just said and really sharpen it to the point that we all have a common understanding of how to move that forward, that we share that goal, and how do we lead to a transformational approach that actually is going to yield a different outcome. But we cannot do this with a little bit of tweak here, a little bit of tweak here. Here's a lesson plan there. There's a model over there. There's a partnership over there. It's just not going to add up in time. And so when we did this effort back last summer to build a national strategy, we came up with a framework for how to do this, and they unearthed in that process, because we were very deliberate in the who was involved in that conversation. We came up with a really robust beginning of a national strategy. But Laura, building on your point, that it's not a national strategy. In reality, it's a fractal strategy. It goes from national to subnational or supranational. That's a new one for me, to community and back up and down, right? Because, but still, if we don't come up with a plan where we really forge that together with a new goal of what education is supposed to do in society, I don't think we're going to meet the moment. And I think that that's what we're called to do. Thank
you, Frank. It really resonated when you said something that to me spoke as we can't lesson plan our way out of this. Yes. And it's unfair also to the teachers and educators, formal and non-formal, right, to be able to have that type of expectation. Yep. Thank you. Laura?
So thank you so much. I want to say yes to Christina and Frank, and say yes 100%. And I want to say that it's really encouraging to hear a leader at Governor Inslee's level make these connections. And I think where we are right now is there's still a lot of a gap in people recognizing the opportunity for education to contribute to climate solutions, both in terms of, sustainability, in terms of adaptation, in terms of education, and actually preparing a next generation to advance a more sustainable future. And I think it's really encouraging to hear a leader at the governor level recognize the critical role, both from personal experience, having grown up and having that connection to the environment himself, but also seeing it more holistically across what the needs are of the state. And so I think it really does, there's more work to be done. But I think one thing that we need to think about as a field and an opportunity is, how do we get more people like Governor Inslee talking about this issue as a part of climate solutions? And I think the opportunity to build more leaders in that space and, leverage some of the stuff that he was talking about with NGA, hopefully, I think can really lead to more of these conversations and get more people when they're talking about climate solutions. It's not just, transforming the energy grid or, thinking about electric vehicles, but it's actually about preparing a society and a workforce to lead this work. And I think we all have an opportunity to really help more leaders express that in a holistic and comprehensive way. And I was appreciative of that.
Thank you so much, Laura. And so I'm going to put a bit of a prompt and then invite our panelists to both, jump in with conversations or additions and the like. We've also had a host of questions and comments in the chat. So if you notice something that sings or speaks to you, bring that in. And thank you also for audience that when you register, several of you put in questions that we'll try to get to. So in a way, thank you, because we have an abundance to work with. And with that, also want to acknowledge we may not get to all of them. So please know that we're not intentionally dismissing any questions. But I want to do two things. One is, Laura, you mentioned that framing that I think is really important as we're talking about the both and the and. That's simple, but often in a lot of this work, it's important to hold that because it's a way to practice what I would think of as a type of accountability that will actually move us forward and not feel that people then say, well, wow, I'm being attacked. So what's the point of trying to be in here? It's a both and. We care so much that we want to move with you forward even more so. And to Christina's point around talking about using some of these terms like equity and justice, Christina was wondering if you either had some examples that could be helpful to the audience as the difference, but the importance acknowledging those. And then of course, invite Laura and Frank, if you also see connections to that, or what are the ways in which your respective work is looking to also engage with that.
Yeah, thank you. This is the part where I'm like, oh, how do I explain these terms? Because there's the complex theoretical definitions, and then there's the version you give to your 7-year-old. And so I'll try to get down into my 7-year-old self and think that I'm talking to my daughter. But the way that I like to think about it, especially as we're talking about kind of what do we need to do with the education system to really move the needle on climate action, the way I distinguish equity and justice is that we can think about trying to put solar panels on our schools, create water, or water gardens, compost vegetable gardens, and so on our school grounds. This approach would be consistent with a sort of fixing inside the system, right? So we're trying to ensure that our schools are lower carbon, contributing to more environmentally sustainable kind of spaces. Then we think, okay, well, we want to make sure that this is accessible to all. And so we want to target first low-income communities, communities of color, historically marginalized, disadvantaged communities. We want to ensure that they have equal access, knowing that they have from the very beginning the card stacked against them. This is sort of addressing it from an equity approach. We want to ensure that we have equal access. We want to ensure that they have equal opportunity to these kinds of learning environments, these environmentally conducive spaces of learning. But then when we want to talk about justice, we have to understand, why are these communities excluded from these opportunities in the first place? What are the histories of exploitation, the histories of oppression, the current systemic structures of racism, current patterns of poverty, and the barriers that have to be eliminated in order for that unequal starting position to not even be an issue, not even be a factor. So I think when we want to distinguish in our minds, how do we enable access to some goal versus transform the very reasons why someone does not have access, then we're getting into a conversation more towards the justice lens, away from just thinking about equity and sort of deficit of the individual to what's the structural problems, the structural obstacles that are impeding that access. So I think, this means looking at how the education system is complicit in perpetuating the values of exploitation and, competition, consumption, that perpetuate those systems and structures that have inhibited access and opportunity for some groups more than others. So I think maybe that helps to maybe situate us on a playing field for now, and we'll avoid sort of the more theoretical discussions, although maybe that was a little bit too theoretical too.
No, and I think that's important. I can imagine for some in the audience that may be familiar with different types of variations on the imagery of individuals with an uneven starting ground trying to look over a fence. And justice is looking at why is that fence there in the first place, and what is holding us back from taking that fence down, rather than just providing different size boxes to access.
Exactly.
So, thank you so much, Christina. Frank or Laura? And
I have a response. Laura, do you want to go first?
You can go first.
All right, thank you. So I think Christina, I love the idea of taking down the fence, right? I remember all those cartoons, and I mean, I think that's ultimately what we're doing. But I think when I think about the context of climate and the climate crisis and where we are now, let's remember the first climate warning to a president was 1965, Lyndon Baines Johnson. So we've been, I represent the U.S. Global Change and Climate Change Research Enterprise. And so we've been robust here for a very long time, and yet, society really hasn't fully understood this. And one of the things I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation is we're terrible at systems. We do not teach systems at all well in this country, and we struggle with downstream unintended effects and compounding interests of impact. That surprise us. I'm like, what? How'd that happen? And so, because the amount of transformation in order to deal with these systemic challenges must deal with the systemic issues that are going on in blocking a just transition. Because if we don't, we're just going to either open the doors to new opportunities for some, and there are tremendous opportunities inside of addressing climate change. And, what I think about in a just transition is making sure that every learner has opportunities, like the governor said about that next generation battery. If that actually turns out to be true, who got to create that? Who had the opportunities to have the training, to have the courses, to have the degrees, to be able to be in that moment? And if that's an opportunity, every single person, and there's so many of these types of transformations that are necessary to go from, our current status quo to a future that is equitable, just, and sustainable. But, and also disproportionate impact, because there are communities that have disproportionate impact for a whole host of reasons. That's also an opportunity that is missed if they don't have the opportunities to learn about what they can do. And, unfortunately, our school systems aren't built right now to support the 7th graders, the 4th graders, the 11th graders, the community college students, the career and technical high school students on this opportunity yet. Our technology, finance, innovations are way ahead of our education sector. Sorry. So I think, Laura, when I think about your work, this idea of unlocking the education sector to do exactly what is needed, to do it in a transformational way, because we have to do it fast, and it's right. That's what I get excited about. How do we do that? And I'm game to have that conversation any day of the week.
thank you, Frank. Laura?
Yeah, and I also think that there are some key things that might be in the lens of an equity lens that we need to get started ultimately to lead to justice too. I mean, I think you look at the school facilities that are out there and discrepancies between communities. And yes, we need to analyze that and tear down some of the issues that are leading to those discrepancies. We also need to do what we can now to make sure different communities have better facilities. And so I think, and having better facilities and ensuring that there are electric buses, not diesel buses, healthy locally grown food, thinking about there's better indoor air quality, that stuff all then contributes to health, which is also a part of justice. And I think, making sure that we're making those investments and prioritizing communities of color, low income, rural, urban communities, indigenous communities that have been left out and left with some of these crumbling buildings. We need to have both of these things moving at the same time, because ultimately the urgency of the crisis is too much to fully wait for the transformational work to occur. So I think it has to be both, and moving the trains forward at the same time in order for us to really make progress.
Thank you, Laura. And I remember actually one of my graduate school professors, with some humor, he would say, our puny human brains can't handle systems. And of course, he said it with some humor, because I believe it can handle systems. We have to be aware of how they weren't necessarily designed to handle systems in the way that we adaptively evolved to process information. And so much has changed that those systemic elements, we've built a lot of them. And then if we don't take responsibility for them, those will still continue. Just as that cartoon was early on in the presentation. Oh no, the crises are collaborating better than we are. The irony of it. And so I agree, I think, in terms of really what does it look like to not just think about systemic structure and elements around it, even as we're within them, and support different structures as we're trying to challenge structures that have been with us for decades and hundreds of years, right? So just saying that in both the reality, I think, of facing it, and the hope and optimism in terms of the work that you do. So with that, I wanted to field a question. We still have some time, but field a question around it's, for lack of a better word, it can be simple to obviously think about what's hard and what is the doom and gloom type of scenario that we know also isn't the best to hold on to. So what is giving you hope? What are you looking as the opportunity to actually address injustices, to handle some of these systemic elements in what you're seeing now, even if it's kind of the proverb that we might be planting the tree knowing that the shade is not for us? Laura?
So I have a very easy answer about what's giving me hope. And, I'd love to share a little bit about the work that we've out with K-12 Climate Action. A year ago, we launched a commission with education leaders, environment leaders, civil rights leaders, young leaders to all come together to learn about what the education sector can do. And we did release this plan. Thank you, Frank, for giving me the idea to show it yesterday around what the education sector can do. And I want to say one of the things that really gives me hope is we have 3 leaders on our commission, Vic Barrett, Kira O'Brien, and Nana Agrawal-Hardin, who are young leaders in this space. And our young people in this country are facing the most significant fears related to climate change, but they're really optimistic about the opportunity to work together and advance solutions. And I look at these young leaders, 2 are progressive, 1's conservative. This issue is not about politics for them. This issue is about their present, it's about their future. And that they see the opportunity when we have a really polarized society going on all around us, they see an opportunity to come together and work on these issues. And I think it's young people like them who are giving me eternal hope for our future. And now we need the adults in the room to work with them and really build intergenerational partnerships to help make sure that we can do this work together. And so that's the main thing that's given me hope.
Thank you. Frank?
It's a great question. It is. And, I'm going to go to a strange answer because I think about this often, because hope is a really important concept. But so in 2018, I had the opportunity to attend, actually Governor Inslee was part of the Global Climate Action Summit. And one of the things they were talking about there was, when you think about the subnational, supernatural work, you see tremendous work that is something that the America's Pledge reports revealed, was that inside the United States, 65% of our GDP by geography, or 61, if I remember right, percent of our population are in places where they're already robustly addressing climate change. That is completely hidden to almost all of us. All of us, most of us, live in a place where we are doing intense planning, commitments, but we're just about to get ready to really roll up our sleeves and do the work. And that's what gives me the hope, is that once we finally realize that the transformation of our sectors in society is what's going to save our economy, save our communities, give opportunities, just opportunities to all of the members in our communities, if we prepare them for that, we're going to start rolling towards solution. And I hope that that is a monstrous roll, a roar, not a roll. And that's what I'm looking at. And I see the beginnings of it. But, you know, the solutions really motivate us to the opportunity. I don't think the problem, deepening people's understanding of the problem, really gives, in fact, my niece, you know, my family have got tons of people working in climate. And so my youngest generation have been bathed in this for a very long time in a disproportionately high dosage. And so she kept a climate anxiety journal where she was really distraught. And what she's now doing is turning that distraught, and it was significant, into the fuel for her action. And that, you know, and she's not the only one, but that's actually what I see. Our young people, that they're vacillating between being overwhelmed and nihilism, and it's dark, and then they turn that, because they can't stay there. They must transform that into action. And you know, which courses are they taking? So what are they taking the course that's going to help them be a part of the solution? And so, you know, that actually gives me a great deal of hope. And I remember talking to Vic on your commission in Paris at COP21 about this exact issue. And what I was really interested in is like, Vic, what are you planning to do? I'm really interested in what your next step is. And I think all of us should be thinking about how to help everyone on their next step towards solutions, towards transformation, so we can actually get on with it. And that's what gives me hope. That's what fuels me to keep doing this for another 15 years.
Thank you, Frank. And actually, you touched on a few things that have been coming in the chat that I'll come back to you in terms of agency and youth and so forth. So Christine, I was wondering if you had a thought in response to that as well.
I always have a very hard time with this question. I think I've expressed this before, because I think I'm at heart a pessimist. But I study large, big global problems, climate change being one of them, gender inequality being another, poverty and international in the context of international development. And, you know, I get hopeless because I think, you know, not only are our brains too small to be able to handle systems, but we're also really terrible at collective action at times. But then it's the at times, right? It's the window to opportunity, and I think it's recognizing how in this space, I feel like in the span of the last 9 months to a year, the number of growing voices from, you know, traditionally from the fringes, that are bringing to the fore their community's issues and really trying to put that in the front and center of how we address as society these hard, complex issues. That's what gets me excited and makes me hopeful. I don't know that it will necessarily, when it will lead to change. Can we make the change in the amount of time that we have? But things like the Sunrise Movement, which has been around, of course, longer than 12 months, or when I see, for example, these groups coming together around really trying to push forward a transition economy as a care economy, right? So really thinking about how a just transition means not just thinking about renewable energy and transportation and infrastructure, but how our care economy can help us transition to a low carbon economy. That makes me hopeful, because that's something that we don't typically think about and see within our current conversations. It's seeing communities bring to the fore a Black, Red, Green New Deal, and ensuring that as we're talking about a Green New Deal, we're not creating false solutions that will inevitably, continue to leave communities behind, but really foreground the historic issues that these communities, Black, Red, Brown communities, have been, in the context of the Black, Red, Green New Deal, how these communities have been struggling with. So I think when I think about that, and the different actors beginning to help us bring that systems thinking into the way we tackle our issues, that's where I get excited and think, okay, let's create the space, invite them to the table, ensure their voices are heard. So it's not just continued on the fringes and you kind of really have to search the internet to figure out who are the people doing these things, but that they are driving the conversation. So I think, that includes youth, and that includes traditionally and historically marginalized and disadvantaged communities.
Thank you, Christina. And so I want to ask one more question before we kind of move into some of your closing thoughts and comments. And in the chat, there's been several comments around this question of, right? So for example, we don't have a quote unquote youth voice on this panel right now. And sometimes that's the question that comes up, right? How are they present? How are they included? What is it that they're able to incorporate and that it's actually valued, because this is who it impacts right now. And of course, acknowledging, as some of you mentioned, how active they are. And I'm stressing that just as Laura mentioned earlier, some comments have been like, at the same time, that shouldn't excuse those with some of the established decision-making power roles, like elected officials, to not take action with the tools currently available to them. So I'm curious, in the work that you're doing and what you're noticing, who you're collaborating with and so forth, how are you noticing are you noticing a good balance around that? Are there things that you're saying we should definitely work on that a little better, that add to maybe the realistic type of hope? And then just to acknowledge that, because I think many in the chat are acknowledging, like, okay, so what are the youth? And we can't excuse those with vested power at the moment, and how maybe those need to be in a better relationship than they have been. I see
Laura,
Frank. Yeah, Laura and then Frank.
So I think one thing that's essential about working with youth is young people cannot do this alone, 100%. And the adults need, and some of these young people are adults too, but we all need to be a part of the solution. This is a moment where we all need to come together. And I think what's critically important about working with youth is it needs to be a deliberate, clear process that you put in place to bring youth into the conversation. This can't be something that's being, the youth is involved to be tokenized. Engaging youth in these conversations means you need to plan for it. You need to reduce barriers that might otherwise be in place, like technical language that you use, and think about how you can invite young people into a space that is meaningful for them, and that they are valued in being a part of this space. And that is one way that this will move this all forward. Youth have to be a part of the dialogue and on equal footing with every other person that is a part of that dialogue. It can't be a one and done. It can't be like, check a box, I've got a young person on a panel. It has to be meaningful inclusion and for youth belonging in this space. And it has to be done with intergenerational partnerships. It cannot be done in isolation. And that's what's really going to make this work better. And that's something that we have been very deliberate about in the work that we have been doing with K-12 climate action. Making sure that you're everything from providing compensation for people's time, making sure that you are breaking down barriers to include and value youth in this space, young people in this space, is something that's critically important.
So everything Laura just said, absolutely. The other piece I would get at in doing work, this is truly intergenerational work. All the generations, we think of them as stacked up, and it's actually flat. In this work, it must be flat. But I think the other piece of that, though, is it is often that the older generations go, well, we kind of messed it up, but the youth, and and I've been in enough engagements with youth of all ranges of ages. There's a lot of range in the youth word, and they want to be at the table with us, and they are powerful agents, but they do not want the older generation to be like, oh, it's ours now. That's not at all, and I hear it way too often, and it is not right, because it puts there's a lot more power in the older generations, unfortunately. And so this is an urgent issue that must move forward now. And so to have somebody like Governor Inslee speaking in this way is a demonstration of that older generation's power. But what to do with that power must be informed by sustained, supported, equitable engagement with all generations, but a special emphasis on the youngest, because they have an intergenerational power, a superpower, because when they speak on this issue, it changes the way adults think. Because instead of thinking about cost benefit analysis, they're thinking about legacy and equity. And what are we going to leave to the future? As soon as an adult starts thinking about what are we going to leave to the next generation, and this idea that we never, ever leave the next generation less than we had ourselves. I think that is a concept that goes back hundreds of thousands of years in our species. And it is something we don't do. I don't know, we talk about it in ethos in ways, but it is something, and we're in the position where we might be doing that. We may have already done that, but it is something that motivates all generations in a different way. But it really, but youth have a very specific power to call from. That's part of their agency, and they use it well, but they need help to do it, and they need places to do it, and it needs to be done with integrity to their voice and their perspective. And I've learned this through this work for the last 10 years. I'm schooled, so but we need to get that more widely known.
Thank you, Frank. It's that process of learning and unlearning as we move in the space of intergenerational support. Christina, do you have a response for that? And then I'll ask you for a closing statement.
I do, and my response is really in observing. Much of my work is at a global scale, and so I've observed, the increased inclusion of a youth perspective on panels, and really trying to create space for youth voice and youth participation. But I think that oftentimes this gets highly tokenized, and we want to presume that we are listening or that we're being responsive by creating spaces. But if our actions do not change from that engagement, what is the purpose of making our spaces, open, or including a youth, right, a youth voice, right, in the space. And I feel like if we are really listening to youth, and the anxiety and the despair and the grief, I think we would be taking a very hard look at the underlying drivers that we're allowing to continue forward. I mean, again, going back to the techno fixes, we can think about transitioning to renewable energy. We can think about putting these sort of short-term Band-Aid solutions on our current systems. But if we're not thinking about the long-term social transformations that are needed to our economic systems, our social structures, our political systems, and all of this, we're not really taking into account the future well-being of the next generation and 7 generations down the line. Because if we were serious about that, we would be looking at our economic systems and how our education system is perpetuating the values of that extractive system that leaves people behind and relies on subsidized invisible labor by some communities and some groups over others. But we're not. And that is why I'm not so hopeful, because we're not tackling those hard questions. And if we're really thinking about including youth in these conversations, we should be thinking about that.
Thank you, Christina. And so in a moment, I'm going to ask you all to think of either a word, a statement. You don't have to, you have to have a full, long closing session, essay, but just sit with it and think about what you want to offer the audience as we close. I want to share 2 elements. One of them is a recognition as we, some of the terms we use are kind of entry points, and I think of them as shorthand. So I want to acknowledge that they're never meant to be definitive and all inclusive, because we're going to struggle with that. And so even as we say youth, is that is inclusive of within the work within that to look at racial representation, for example, systemic disenfranchisement and so forth, so that the work continues and we don't perpetuate some of those same elements within that. And then lastly, I want to come back to the idea of education, that as a teacher for myself, one of the things that stuck with me is that a reminder, education just isn't just information dissemination. Right? If it was just that, then as Frank said, right, we should have been done with this back in the 60s. Here's the science, here's information, do something about it. It's about the opportunity to really think about the behavior change, the engagement with the values, attitudes, a whole host of things that we can frame within education. And to Christina's point, we, in theory, are in charge of that, right? There is no magic manuscript that comes down from the heavens and then says, this is the education that must be taught. And so I'm reminded of that, of both the potential and opportunity of this field, as well as the challenges, as Christina mentioned, of what to really wrestle with that and asking some of the hard questions. What power are we willing to give up in service of what? And then what are the reasons we actually act and don't act in preservation of those? And so I want to mention that because to me, at the end, I want to acknowledge that educators in all different roles, so whether you're out in an outdoor education field, whether you're in the classroom, whether you're not in the science field, but you're in a different field, like all of this, every person has a role, and you have such power in that relationship, both to students and to each other, at the same time that we have to recognize all of these other elements around pedagogy and curriculum and public policy and funding and state, federal, and international structural elements. So I just want to mention in there, because I know that just like when we talk about climate change, it can seem like so much. And then within that, the context of our own individual perspective role and the value that has in supporting each other, because to Frank's point, otherwise the climate grief is real and it's there. And those are additional models that we need to be able to model with each other and with our youth to be able to move forward. So wanted to put that in there as an acknowledgement of a bunch of things happening in the chat as well. And so I'll ask Christina, Laura, and then Frank in that order to kind of share a closing word, a thought, or perspective.
Thanks, Jose. And you certainly helped me remember that there is reason to be hopeful, because we do have this opportunity for transformation. And I think my sort of closing thought is that, it can seem like a really hard and overwhelming challenge. I mean, that is what climate change is. It destabilizes our very environment and the very things that we have taken for granted. But I think, there with the energy, I'm just, again, in the last 9 to 12 months, seeing a sea change in public discourse. Change can happen quickly if given the right levers, right? We've got a space and a moment in time that we can really capture. How can we do this differently? And in times where we got to really act fast, sometimes those are the times where we have to slow down and really try to think, how are we doing this right? How are we ensuring that this is addressing the underlying issues? And I think, I think some simple actions that we can all take is just trying to connect the dots, trying to understand how one issue affects another and how that affects another, and really begin to kind of practice this sort of consequential thinking, anticipatory thinking, all these different skills that we say are important for the 21st century. How can we put that into the very ways that we think about our educational challenges, our day-to-day challenges, and really begin to weave together our own lenses for understanding the problem, and then for figuring out how we can act as individuals and then act collectively through our collective voice. So I think I felt like the Debbie Downer in many cases in today's conversation, but I do think that this is our opportunity to really take intention into action. And I leave that with everyone as sort of the space that your sort of closing remarks has helped me to remember. We all have the intentions. Let's take it now to that next step and really begin to do the implementation, the action.
Thank you so much for convening this great group and hosting this great conversation. I've really appreciated the opportunity to be here. And I also just want to add, I think, when we're talking about a whole of society approach to addressing climate change, which is what's necessary for us to really tackle these issues, it doesn't mean that we need to be different people than who we are. We all have different passions, different interests, different skills, and it's actually leveraging those different passions, interests, and skills towards this fight in addressing climate change. And so, I saw a lot of people in the chat just now talking about art, and the truth is there is this, complete need for our society to tackle these issues, and people out there have different skills and expertise. And I think, the one thing I would just continue to encourage people to do is figure out how they can leverage their talents, their passions to this fight, because ultimately it's all of us doing that that's really going to move the needle and help push this forward. And I also just want to give a quick shout out and thank you to the educators who are here, because this has been a really trying year to be a teacher. And I just want to say thank you. 2 years, I guess, to be a teacher. And I just want to say thank you for everything that you do.
I have to build on that last point you just said, Laura. I come from a family of teachers. I was a teacher. I have tremendous sympathy and gratitude for the additional challenge. Being a teacher is one of the hardest things to do. And so to do it during a global pandemic for this long there's not enough thanks that are given to teachers and to families and staff that are supporting the full education system impact. So, usually when I do these kinds of events, I stay away from the chat because I can't listen and chat. I can't do that. My brain, I can do certain things, but that's not one of them. But what was calling me here, and this relates to my final point, was I kept on getting pulled over here. And because I saw some of the people here and I got to meet some new people, and I think we've gotten better at meeting new people electronically over this 18, 19, whatever months we've been doing this grand experiment. But doing this work requires partnership, collaboration. It's all in relation to each other. But the only way we can be in relation to the brilliance and capabilities and new innovations that come from expanding your world is if we expand our world and we listen. And so, partnership, collaboration, relationship, we need to enhance these things so we can actually do this work. And I just got to call out, Christine, I heard you were a little bit negative today on yourself. somebody said, Debbie, Debbie Dazzler. I was like, yes, I want to elevate that. That's awesome, right? So we don't know the necessarily impact of our words and our actions. So sometimes it's nice to hear that backward. So that's where I leave it. But thank you for this opportunity. And the last point I'll say is NAAE's conference this year. Oh boy, climate has showed up. Rich, interesting, robust, intersectional climate work at the NAAE conference. So I'm super excited about what's coming. I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Frank. And I notice Debbie Dazzler as well. So Christina, see, sometimes you don't know that you are the hope in that way. And so, and a reminder to everybody as well. So I know we've gone right up to the edge of time, and just a sign of all the rich and abundant conversation and much more that we can go into. But I'd like to turn it over to Sarah, who is NAAE's Director of Policy and Affiliates Relations. And with that, I want to say muchas gracias, and I'm glad I was here with you.
Thank you so much, Jose, and thank you to the panelists. My head is just so full and my heart is full also. And I can't wait to find opportunities to continue this conversation. I'm just going to really quickly, for those of you who are going to stick around for a few more minutes, talk about a few of the opportunities that we all might have collectively to continue this conversation, and some of the work that NAAEE is doing in this space. Just thrilling to have the governor on, and I know we identified a lot of ways in which there is a ton of obstacles yet to overcome and challenges whose solutions are not yet evident, but I do feel a sense of momentum that we're even having these conversations. Judy, if you want to go to the next slide. One thing that we've done recently in partnership with a lot of folks who've been here on the call with us today, including our three panelists, is to launch a coalition for climate education policy. We're working together to think about policy solutions, and in particularly making sure that education is firmly rooted in any whole of government effort to address the climate crisis. And we really hope that you'll join us. We'd love to think about how we could leverage this coalition to keep convening some of these thoughtful and enriching discussions. So please go to climateedpolicy.org and join us. It's going to take all of us. Judy, you can go to the next slide. I just want to show you some of our working group members, again, include folks that you all know that have been working in this space for a really long time. And we're really grateful to be working in this space with them. And then, we heard a lot today about how much work there is to do at every level. And so again, it is going to take all of us, and we would love to have this coalition provide at least one space for working together to advance our common cause. And next slide. We do also convene monthly action network calls for advocates. I saw a little bit of chatter in the chat about wanting some guidance and direction and support and thinking about how to engage in advocacy at the local or state level. And this is a great place for someone who's really new to advocacy to get started and make connections with others. They're usually the first Thursday of the month. And I believe Sarah Johnson dropped a link in the chat to the Advocacy, Policy, and Civic Engagement group on our EE Pro platform. That's a place where you can get all the updates from that action network and find links to join the calls and so on. Next slide. And then we do have an analysis of state education policies coming out. We've been working with SEPN, the Sustainability and Education Policy Network, to take a look at where climate change education is showing up in various state policies, and identify the gaps, and then think about some recommendations for trying to address those gaps. The preliminary results of this will be coming out at our conference, which is right around the corner. But we're also hoping to build on this with an educator and administrator survey, and also doing a deeper dive into some case studies and looking at what we're calling pockets of innovation to hopefully help uplift some of those examples that we could all take some hope in. So look for more information on that. And mentioning our conference, and thanks Frank for the plug, it is right around the corner. The research symposium is on October 7th through the 8th. And our conference takes place October 12th through the 15th. but we actually have pre-conference events, special workshops, and all kinds of ways to engage really throughout those 2 weeks. And so I just want to highlight a couple of specific opportunities. We hope you'll join us. We just announced this new session, Building a Climate of Hope, which is very germane to our conversation here today. Young voices reflect on resilience, creativity, and the future. And this will feature a panel made up of our EE30 under 30 awardees. It's going to be on Tuesday, October 5th at 3:30 Eastern. There's a link to register in advance. And this is traditionally at our conference, just an incredible highlight, hearing from these innovative leaders from around the globe and what they're doing in their communities to make a difference. And so please, if you can join nothing else, think about joining this particular session. And on the next slide, you'll see some familiar faces as I go through these next couple of slides. Our research symposium will close with a panel on the opportunities and challenges in climate change education research. That's going to be a great session. The next slide. We also have just an incredible lineup of keynote speakers, featured speakers. We have some poets, we have artists. It's going to be an amazing lineup. On our opening night, please join us for that. That's October 12th. And then it's okay to keep going, Judy. I'll just try to be really quick. We have Dr. John King as a featured speaker on the 14th, and he was a co-chair of the commission that Laura Shifter has been leading. He's just a tremendous leader in really advancing an education agenda that embeds all of these pieces about climate literacy and sustainability that we've been talking about here today. And then we will close out with another terrific lineup on October 15th. And so again, there's a full agenda of sessions, many of which will have a focus on climate change education and a lot of opportunities to network and get to know others who are working in this space. But these opening and closing sessions are also a great way to really hear from some innovative thinkers if you can't participate in the full conference. We've purposely created a registration structure that includes tiered options for payment so that we are going to make this as affordable as possible to anyone who wants to participate. If anyone really truly can't participate, if a fee is involved, please feel free to reach out to the NAAE team. We don't want payment to be a barrier to participation for anyone. And all the content is archived and folks can continue to access it for a period of time beyond the conference. Did I have, and also we always pepper the schedule with lots of fun and games. We have a trivia night on October 14th that I was skeptical about last year, I will fully admit, with a virtual conference, but it turned out to be so much fun and so engaging and a great way to just have a really good time with your colleagues from around the globe. So we hope that you'll join us for as much of it as you can. And I think that my colleagues are popping all kinds of links into the chat if you want to take a look at registration packages. So Judy, I went as fast as I could.
Yeah, no, you did a great job. And I just quickly want to thank everybody and remind you that you will be getting the chat and all of this information. And you'll see that at the conference, a number of the people you heard today, like Jose, will be facilitating the final panel, and Christina will be on that, and Frank is part of the conference, that this conversation will continue, and we have a whole young professionals track. So thanks to Sarah, Ann, and Jose for all your work in making this town hall meeting happen. And thanks to all of you who are still on and a part of this community. We look forward to hearing from you on how to keep the conversation going. And when we talk about these big issues, how to bring it down to the level of what is it we can do in our communities and our work to start addressing the systemic barriers that exist. And I do want to thank again Krishna Roy, who works with us and is wonderful, and her relationship with Governor Inslee made this all happen. So Krishna, thank you so much. And I want you all to keep up the great work that you're doing. I know it's a tough time, but there is hope out there, and there's a lot that we can do together. So thank you all. We hope to see you at the conference. And I just want to say, if money is an issue, write to me. It doesn't need to be an issue for the conference. We want people to engage in the conversation. Thanks to all of you. Jose, magnificent. facilitation, and to all of our speakers. Take care, everyone, and thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you, Judy, and your amazing team for making this possible.
Frank, thank you.